areas. Practice good personal protection against mosquito bites to prevent mosquito-borne infections, such as dengue fever and Japanese encephalitis.
From the day we are born, our body clock controls our lives.
It's like your watch. Without a battery, it keeps ticking and ticking.
Impossible as it is to believe, they're the ones who are taking the decisions for us.
Monday night, Well-Being, Terry Wogan's Time of Your Life at 9:30 on Pearl.
Marvellous. It's me every time.
It's Christmas.
Is it true you missed a child?
Me? No. Well, in a way, yes.
A child's been made!
I'm sorry I messed things up, lad.
Can anyone save it?
How do you think he's,
Fine.
Friday, Oriental Watch Company presents Arthur Christmas on Pearl's Friday Attractions.
Probably just,
U.S.-Cuba ties restored after decades of hostility. New housing reserves set up locally to help meet long-term target. And funeral service with full honors for a local fireman. Good evening. The wheels are in motion for a sweeping plan aimed at remaking the relationship between the United States and Cuba. The extraordinary initiative will end more than 50 years of hostilities. James Aiken reports.
These 50 years have shown that isolation has not worked. It's time for a new approach.
The shift in U.S. policy towards Cuba began almost 2 years ago when Barack Obama greenlighted secret meetings in Canada between American and Cuban officials. The talks even included personal involvement from Pope Francis.
Today, we are making these changes because it is the right thing to do. Today, America chooses to cut loose the shackles of the past so as to reach for a better future for the Cuban people, for the American people, for our entire hemisphere, and for the world.
As Obama made his dramatic announcement, Cuban President Raul Castro told his nation that Obama deserved the respect and recognition of Cuba. A day after the two leaders spoke by phone, a prisoner exchange took place that included the release of a government contract worker who had been held in Cuba for 5 years.
Two wrongs never make a right. I truly hope that we can now get beyond these mutually belligerent policies, as this is a game changer, which I fully support.
In return, the three remaining members of the intelligence group, the Cuban Five, were freed and returned to Cuba. Now, using his executive authority, Obama aims to expand economic ties with Cuba, lift some travel restrictions, open an embassy in Havana, and review Cuba's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. Residents on both sides say the outreach was long overdue.
I think it's great. It's about time. The embargo was a fiasco. It was just giving Castro an excuse for all the shortcomings that they had in Cuba.
But Republican lawmakers are condemning the new U.S. policy, saying it gives Cuba's communist rulers legitimacy without requiring commitments. The U.S. severed diplomatic relations in 1961, the same year then-President Fidel Castro declared Cuba a socialist state. For now, a 53-year-old U.S. economic embargo on Cuba remains unless lawmakers decide to end it. James Aiken, TVB News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said today his country's economy is strong enough to weather the crisis in the ruble. Alan Buknia reports.
At his annual press conference, Vladimir Putin said that despite the currency crisis and low oil prices that are battering Russia's oil-driven economic growth, the country's currency reserves are sufficient to keep the economy stable. He said he expects the current situation to last no longer than 2 years, but the economy could recover faster if external factors change for the better. After plunging 15% early this week, the ruble rebounded by about 10% yesterday. That followed a massive rise in interest rates and a Russian central bank sell-off of foreign currency. The moves are to encourage traders to hold on to the ruble.
There's been the first signs that maybe the authorities, and in particular the central bank, are beginning to understand the extent of the problem. They've provided some new measures which are securing and giving confidence to the financial system.
Still, with the ruble down more than 50% since January, consumers continue to flock to stores, frantically buying imported big-ticket items such as appliances and cars. Their fear is that they won't be able to afford them after an inevitable spike in their costs. IKEA announced earlier this week its prices would be going up starting today. Many stores chose to close, opting to take a wait-and-see approach. Apple has suspended its online sales in Russia. The pressure on the ruble, coupled with Western sanctions, appear to be having some effect on Putin's willingness to move towards resolving the Ukraine conflict. The European Union's top diplomat just completed a two-day visit to Ukraine for talks with Russian officials.
We shared the impression that there might be some elements that could make us think that there might be some more willingness to solve the conflict on the Russian side, on President Putin's side.
Putin, for his part, says Kiev and pro-Russian rebels should conduct a quick all-for-all prisoner swap before Christmas. Alan Bucknia, TVB News.
Interest rates in the United States won't go up anytime soon. The U.S. Federal Reserve says it will be patient in deciding when to raise rates as the American economy shows signs of strengthening.
As progress in achieving maximum employment and 2% inflation continues, at some point it will become appropriate to begin reducing policy accommodation. But based on its current outlook, the committee judges that it can be patient in doing so. In particular, the committee considers it unlikely to begin the normalization process for at least the next couple of meetings.
Asian shares climbed today thanks to easing concerns about an imminent rate hike. Here in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index finished 246 points, or more than 1% higher at 22,832. Here in Hong Kong, the government has established a $27 billion housing reserve to meet the public housing supply target for the next decade. Here's Rani Samtani.
The government's newly announced goal is to build 290,000 public housing units in the 10 years from 2015-16. Today, Financial Secretary John Tsang said the Hong Kong Monetary Authority will set aside the investment return on the government's fiscal reserves to set up a housing fund. The $27 billion housing reserve will be used to support the public housing development program and related infrastructure. Zhang said the government will ensure the Housing Authority has adequate funding to meet its target. The government will inject money into the fund in phases over the next few years. Housing Society Chairman Marco Wu said construction costs are quite high, so the government should help. Lawmaker Wu Chi-wai also supports the move.
You need money, you need land to complete the task. I think the Financial Secretary is doing a good thing that he tries to prepare money for the Housing Authority to use in the future.
But Civic Party lawmaker Kwok Ka-ki is against the idea and threatens to veto it.
In no way the government will run in the difficulty financially to support any scheme, including the building of new public housing. So we cannot accept this excuse. And if this will come to the voting in the electoral, we have no choice but to veto it.
Zhang said once the administration and the Housing Authority agree on the amount of money and a timetable, the government will seek approval from the Legislative Council's Finance Committee to withdraw the funds from the Housing Reserve for developing public housing units. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
There were emotional moments at the funeral of a senior firefighter killed in a gas explosion at a flat in Shekime Estate last month. Principal fireman Leung Kwok-kei died on the 4th of this month from injuries he sustained in the blast. He was 49. The Chief Secretary for Administration and Secretary for Justice were among government officials at the ceremony. The funeral procession then proceeded to the scene of the tragedy and then the Mongkok fire station where Leung had served. The holiday season is right around the corner, but revelers may feel a bit disappointed because a number of festive events may not be held this year. Christmas in Hong Kong may not be the same this year. Several major countdown events around town may not be held. The Food and Environmental Hygiene Department said it had received an application to hold a countdown event outside Times Square in Causeway Bay on New Year's Eve. But the applicant has now withdrawn the application. Times Square refused to say whether its annual countdown event has been cancelled. As for another popular countdown spot at Canton Road in Tsim Sha Tsui, no applications were received for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, and the deadline for application has passed. However, the Tourism Board will continue to hold a countdown event and a fireworks display on New Year's Eve. Meanwhile, the Immigration Department expects the number of arrivals and departures to hit 13.59 million during the Christmas and New Year holidays. This will be a 9.8% increase from last year. This Saturday is expected to be the peak period for travelers leaving Hong Kong via the border checkpoints, while December 27th will be the peak period for those entering. The Office of the Ombudsman will be reviewing the way leaking or burst private water pipes are repaired. Stephanie Choi explains why.
The watchdog has received complaints about delays in the handling of leaking or burst private water pipes. This, the Ombudsman says, has resulted in fresh water wasted over extended periods of time. According to the Waterworks Ordinance, the Water Supplies Department should ask owners of faulty pipes to fix any reported leakage within a specified period, or the department would consider cutting off water supply. Preliminary findings by the Ombudsman showed the department would take into consideration whether the leakage affected people's lives and property, as well as the structural safety of the buildings involved. But since the wastage of fresh water isn't an important factor for consideration, the watchdog said it seems the department doesn't have any criteria or method to estimate the amount of fresh water wasted. The Ombudsman said information provided by the Water Supplies Department showed that between 2009 and 2013, about half of the almost 5,000 private water pipe leaks repairs took more than 2 months to complete. It added it was almost impossible to gauge the amount of fresh water lost. The Ombudsman will look into the procedures and efficiency of the department in following up on the complaints and how the department assesses the urgency of repairs. That includes whether the amount of fresh water wasted is taken into account. The Ombudsman will also investigate how the department exercises its statutory power in urging owners of faulty pipes to take responsibility for the repairs. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
The Labour Department has issued a warning letter to ATV for failing to pay its staff's November salaries, asked if this would affect the station's chances for renewing its free-to-air TV license. The Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development had this to say.
My colleagues at the Labour Department are providing the necessary assistance to the employees concerned, and that's from one angle. As far as we are concerned, I'm concerned about the broadcasting angle, and that according to, we have the rule of law. So according to law, ATV must comply with the provisions of the broadcasting ordinance as well as the license conditions.
In sports now, big wins for Tottenham and Liverpool in the League Cup last night. Tony Saban reports.
Liverpool have endured a torrid few weeks, but there was redemption for the Reds in the League Cup.
Liverpool have the lead.
Raheem Sterling was the star of the show, scoring twice to beat Championship leaders Bournemouth 3-1. Their reward is a date with Chelsea in the semi-finals towards the end of next month.
It's taken a long time for us to find rhythm this season, but what has never stopped is the work rate of the players. And you come to a place like this tonight, it takes character and quality to get through.
Also celebrating a big win last night are Tottenham, who thrashed Premier League rivals Newcastle.